Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So good to see so many people turn out. Welcome to Fashion Forward. As you just heard, my name is Paul Tierney. Really pleased to be here today, chairing this discussion, the rise of the fashion blogger, and what this has meant, basically, to the fashion industry. I guess, as it's titled, it's kind of print versus digital. I want you to think of it as a friendly, I hope it's friendly, kind of boxing match between two contenders. So helping me along today, two very extremely well-respected individuals in the industry. In the magazine corner, can I present Elaine Lloyd-Jones, who's the editor at GRAZIA Middle East. I'm sure you're very familiar with Elaine. Yeah, I'm sure you all know GRAZIA, especially it's the region's biggest weekly magazine. So
and it's on everyone's chairs, I think.
Yes, everyone's sitting on a copy, so that's really good. So yeah, Elaine, in her time as editor, she's not only enlisted guest editors as important as Dolce & Gabbana, she's also developed the GRAZIA Style Awards, with people attending like Christian Louboutin, Christopher DeVos, Peter Pilotto. Yeah, she's raised the profile of the brand quite considerably, quite some achievement. She's introduced, which you've probably seen, the seasonal Perfect Bound edition, and secured exclusives with a slew of local and international designers. So thanks for coming today, Elaine. And in the blogging corner, can I present Tala Samman, who I think you're probably all familiar with as well. Tala was born in Chicago, but she's of Syrian descent and grew up in Dubai. She's a London College of Fashion graduate, and she edited the first blog to come out of the UAE in 2009. Her blog, myfashdiary.com, I'm sure a lot of you are regular readers, has been nominated in Alain's magazine Best at Dubai Awards, as well as Marie Claire UK Blog and Twitter Awards. She was also named as one of Dubai's Hot 100 in 2011. So thank you very much for coming today, Tala. And like I say, I'm Paul Tierney, who not as famous around these parts, but I'm a writer, editor, and university lecturer. I've been a lifestyle editor for a lot of years, over 2 decades, working for a variety of publications. I've written for everybody from Love Magazine, Pop, The Independent, London Evening Standard. Plus I edit a magazine called Pony Step, which some of you might know. It's one of a new breed of kind of glossy biannual style magazines out of London. So I've worked across print and online, so I can see things from both sides, if you like. And I also teach at university at London College of Fashion and other institutions where I teach on the short courses, also undergraduate level BA fashion journalism, sort of teaching students the principles of fashion journalism, if you like. But principally on the short course program, which we also, quick plug here, we also teach short courses here in Dubai 3 times a year. So if you want to know more, you can come and do one of those at a later date. Anyway, to the subject in hand, if you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought of blogs and blogging in general, I think my reaction would have been very different to what it is today. Things have changed considerably. I think 5 years ago I would have been probably quite negative. I would have been quite down on the subject. It wasn't like I was frightened that bloggers were suddenly going to take the food out of my mouth and my living was going to be destroyed by this new generation of people. It wasn't so much that I felt that. It was more that I was quite irritated that this new generation of people who had a couple of ideas and a laptop could suddenly pretend they were journalists. I felt like they were young upstarts that didn't deserve to be here. I suppose I was slightly embittered and a little bit nervous that maybe times were changing, and they certainly have changed. But then a couple of things happened that made me change my mind quite considerably. The first person that really made me think, actually there's something about this blogging lark, was a lady that you're all familiar with, Susie Bubble. Susie Bubble is probably one of the most famous bloggers in the world, and I had the pleasure of going on a press trip with her to Florence a few years ago to cover an event in Florence. There was myself, 2 other print journalists, and Susie, and we arrived in Florence. The print journalists got delivered to one hotel. Susie got delivered to a better hotel down the road, which made me think something was up. And then I spent the day with her. It was at Pitti, which is the big trade show in Florence. And it was a little bit like being with a kind of pop star or somebody quite famous. She was a celebrity in her own right. People were coming up to her and asking for autographs, or photographers jumping from behind trees to get a photograph of her. Everywhere we went, people were, wanting her attention, wanting, to have a picture taken with her, wanting her opinion on what they were wearing. It seemed to me like she kind of had some real presence. A little bit later that day, we bumped into Scott Schumann from the Sartorialist, another one of the original bloggers who's gone on to do very well for himself as a photographer. He was in Florence that day signing his book that Taschen had published, the Sartorialist book, which was a roundup of all his best photographs. So he was, quite happy to be there, quite happy to be basking in all the glory and attention. He was with his girlfriend, Garance de Ray, who you probably see her blog as well, a very, very popular blog. So there was Scott, Garance, and Susie, this little triumvirate of bloggers, all getting the attention, and me, that nobody knew who I was, nobody was asking me for my autograph, nobody really cared about me being a print journalist. And actually, I didn't really mind. It just actually opened my eyes to the idea that bloggers were here to stay, they were having impact, and they certainly were getting people's attention. The other thing that really changed my mind is I have a very good friend in the fashion industry, Guido Palau, who's one of the world's top sort of session hairdressers, does the hair for all the major ready-to-wear shows. And, he'll be doing the hair for Donatella Versace or Mucha Prada or Marc Jacobs, and it's a big deal, the hair in fashion shows, as you know. And when he's done the shows, when the season is finished, he takes route in New York and does a kind of press junket where all the beauty editors will sit and do interviews with Guido, and he'll talk about what hair he's done for Miu Miu, or how to do the Alexander Wang ponytail or whatever. And sort of traditionally, there would be like one day of the top beauty editors in America, so Allure, Marie Claire, Vogue, Elle, etc., and that would be it. Now they have 3 separate days, so all the beauty bloggers, the best in America, all get flown into New York and spend as much time with Guido as the editor of Allure. Now for me, that sort of spelt that at that point bloggers were on par with magazine editors. There was no doubt in my mind that the 2 things were quite equal now. And in fact, since that happened, and we'll just be discussing that in a minute, things have gone even crazier, if you like. Bloggers have developed, they've become more than the second-class citizens that they were first seen to be. Now they're sitting in the front row. They're signed to agencies. They have, agents that sort of map out their every move, getting them deals and such like. They're treated almost like reality TV stars, which I think a lot of them are in effect. They're gifted, they're fated, they're driven to places. They are stars in their own right. Some of them are even designing their own capsule fashion collections. It seems like a blogger's recommendation can get as many hits now as a page in any international fashion magazine. And their endorsements, and perhaps this is the greatest law for many people, can bring in as much as 6-figure deals for individual bloggers. So there's gold in there, those hills, I suppose. And I think, we can discuss this in a little while, but maybe getting away from the kind of monetary rewards, I think it's quite a rich area to be involved with at the moment. I'm kind of wondering whether I'm in the wrong job, actually. It seems they're doing very well. Elaine, if I can just come to you first of all, did you see this revolution coming? Did you see this happening in the world of fashion?
I think it kind of like slowly crept in and then just went boom.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think that bloggers are threatening print.
No.
I think it's actually two very different platforms, and they kind of work together to complement each other.
Relatively recently, that bloggers were seen to be kind of second class. Like, you know, they might get into a show, but they would be on the back row. What was it, do you think, that changed
I think the industry did turn their nose up at first, because obviously, you know, you've got established editors and journalists who've been slogging away for 20, 30 years, and then along comes, can't remember how old Tavi was when she first came onto the scene, but yeah. And then, you know, she's sitting front row and she's been given the same recognition by the brands. So I think it left a bad taste for a lot of people, but, you know, similarly, there have been so many bloggers, you know, who I respect, because they take what they do so seriously, and you can see that, and you can see the passion, and you can see the talent.
Right. So. Okay, interesting. Tala, if I can just come to you. When did you know instinctively that blogging was the direction that you wanted to go into? What was the impetus for you?
So I started the blog 4 years ago when I was still at university. Is my voice fine?
That's
it is,
okay,
yeah. 4 years ago, and it was just a diary, kind of sharing my fashion experiences. I was studying in London. My mom was the face of Nina Ricci, and I just thought I'd kind of share things with people that were interested in that. I wouldn't have thought I would be doing it as a full-time job, which is what I'm doing right now, and monetizing out of it. And I just thought it was kind of a diary, and that's it.
What were the blogs or the things that you were looking at that inspired you originally?
At that time, there were a few American. I didn't even know of Brian Boy at that time. There were a few, and I remember when I was living in London, Net-a-Porter would have an event, and it would be 3 bloggers there, and I mean, it was just a tiny bloggers event. It wasn't as big as it is now, and I remember I just thought it would never work in the Middle East because we were a little behind within the fashion industry, and I just thought online was non-existent here. And
and the two things, the technology that's advanced incredibly over the last few years to a great degree, that's obviously pushed things forward. I'm just wondering, you know, like in the Middle East, for instance, you know, I would have thought that more people would have embraced the technology and wanted to share their thoughts. I'm wondering why that wasn't the case.
I think they did eventually. I think when I started it, actually I got featured in Khaleej Times at that point because the journalist was intrigued about the whole online thing, and she just kind of wrote a small piece on it. And I remember meeting with a brand the next time I was in Dubai, really just to understand what a blog was, what I was doing, how I interacted with those readers. But it was not existent. I don't know, magazines didn't exist online, and the only thing that people used was Facebook. And
okay. So Elaine, you're very familiar with the sort of with the feel of this area and the way that people operate and what they want. Are you surprised at Tala's success with her particular blog? Why do you think it's been so successful?
I think probably because it's a small market and there aren't actually that many people doing it. So she's also paved the way for a lot of other aspiring journalists and stylists and photographers to do the same. And word gets around, so, you know.
It's one of those areas, though, that when the original bloggers that started, they all had their kind of their gimmick, if you like, that, you know, either doing street style photography or like Susie doing her look of the day, or Tommy Ton at Jack and Jill doing his kind of like pre-show and after-show photography. And everyone had a sort of niche thing. Is it more difficult now for bloggers to actually do something different? Do you think that because the floodgates have opened now, so many people are trying to do a very similar thing, that it's...
I've been seeing a lot of people doing the same thing, which I find shocking, because at the end of the day I follow different blogs because they're completely different, and because I'm going to be checking a specific blog for something completely different. Yeah.
Do you think, Tala, that I know few magazine editors originally were quite nervous about this sort of onslaught of blogs, like it really might have taken their jobs away. Do you think it has affected the magazine industry at all? Do you think people have taken note of it?
I mean, I won't speak on behalf of a magazine editor. I personally don't see it affecting. I used to buy just as much print magazines as I do now, and I read print magazines for different reasons that I would maybe check out Vogue.com, Refinery 29, or more personal blogs.
I think a lot of criticism that sometimes blogs, that's leveled about blogs are, and we'll come to this a little bit later, about the delivery of, even though it's more instant than magazines, that it can sometimes look a bit shoddier, or that the presentation's not as good.
It's more raw.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And I think that's its beauty, do you think?
I think people like that because at the end of the day you blog instantly and it's more raw and it's from a different perspective and it's someone you kind of relate to, whereas when I read a magazine it's more of a fashion industry leader speaking to the public rather than, me speaking to people that can relate to me.
Sure, okay. Elaine, you've seen obviously blogs become more and more popular, and you said earlier that you think the two things can coexist. But I'm just wondering, at any point in your time at GRAZIA, there's been discussions about having to improve your online content or make the magazine a bit more blog-like, for instance?
I mean, I don't think bloggers, have caused us to increase our online presence. I wouldn't sort of hold them responsible. I think just the way technology is moving forward has, forced all magazines and publishers to, implement media strategies, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, because obviously, to keep up, we need to deliver something instantly too. But similarly, we use all those tools to drive our readers back to the magazine. You can intrigue them with something on Facebook. It's a snippet of something, and they will get the full story when they buy the magazine.
Okay. We just go back to basics. I mean, to be honest, the main difference I always feel between the two things is that a magazine is a tangible object that you can hold in your hands and go back to. Magazine journalism is reflective on the way that magazines are put on coffee tables and picked up at a separate time and put down again. The blogs are a little bit more instantaneous and a bit more...
Which is maybe why they can afford to be a bit more raw, because people are literally sort of flicking, through them and looking at several different ones, because they're also niche as well. To get the content that you'd get in an issue of GRAZIA, you've got celebrity news, you've got global news, you've got real life features, trends pages, beauties, what's happening in the region. It's, you'd have to access so many different blogs to do that.
Right.
And I think, there's a pleasure in physically picking up a magazine and taking that time to yourself to kind of look through it and enjoy the beautiful fashion pages that, people might not get that sense of excitement out of looking at a blog.
Absolutely. You're a weekly magazine, and I suppose, your turnover is quite fast. But if you were a monthly magazine editor, would you not have even the slightest pang of jealousy that your stories cannot be as instant now on the page?
They might not be as instant, but they would certainly be more in depth.
Right.
And they would offer more of an insight. So, for example, Tala might announce on her blog the launch of the Isabel Marant for H&M collection. Then, a weekly or a monthly magazine would have, an interview with the designer herself. We would be at a studio in Paris. We would give more of an insight into how that actually happened.
Now, Tala, you've, we talked about pangs of jealousy. Do you sometimes, if we talk about budgeting and the high gloss factor of magazines, do you sometimes wish you had more budget or more time to spend on the presentation side? We said it's sometimes nice for the stories to be quick and a little bit more raw, but would you sometimes like to ramp up the way the presentation?
I'm now signed with a media agent here, and they kind of start pushing me to do that. But I think the beauty of blogs is the fact that it's easy to read and it's raw, and I like that. And I feel like if it's gonna get any bigger than that. It turns into a magazine. And at the end of the day, I write everything myself. I do everything myself. I take my own pictures myself. And yeah.
It's all self-produced. I mean, there's been the debate sort of raging for years about publishing in general, about the death of newspapers. I mean, newspapers, the sales are down. Magazine sales are down. Some publications. Very interesting story in the London Evening Standard last week about Hearst, who publish Harper's Bazaar in the UK. Their sales have tripled. Their profits have tripled in the last tax year, and every single one of their titles now has digital presence. And without getting into the politics of publishing, Condé Nast, who are their big rivals, their profits are actually down, and they don't have as big an online presence as Hearst. So it just goes to show that magazines have had to kind of step up and get in line, fall in line with what's happening. There's no doubt in my mind that there's a little illustration here of magazine shops could end up being boarded up and yesterday's news if they're not careful. Do you ever see, Elaine, the time where that might come, where there will be no magazines on the shelves at all?
I hope
in our lifetime,
I mean,
maybe.
I hope it never happens.
Right.
You know, Karl Lagerfeld starts his day by reading 20 different newspapers, and I'm sure there's a lot more people like that. But also, I think, you know, if anything, maybe magazines are becoming a bit more permanent. You know, we have collector's editions, we have bumper issues. You know, GRAZIA UK are collaborating with people like Katie Grand on their covers. Corrine Roitfeld's just launched the CR book, and it's, you know, it's a magazine, but it could be a coffee table book at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my experience with Pony Step, which I mentioned earlier, Pony Step started off as a website, and it was great. You know, we still have a website as well. If I go off and I interviewed Dylan Jones, who's the editor of GQ in the UK. I did a really nice interview with him, and we were able to put it up like almost the next day. It's very instant. You get great feedback. People are tweeting, they're writing about it. It feels there's a nowness to it. Whereas if we'd waited to put it in, you know, the next issue, everything that he talks about, I don't know whether you saw on TV, but there was a big spat with Russell Brand at the GQ Men of the Year Awards. Russell Brand was very, a bit rude about the sponsors, Hugo Boss, and caused a bit of a furore in the UK press. Now, if we'd left it till months before it went to print, all that would have been bad news. It would have been old news, basically. So there's something about the instantaneous effect. But we did notice at Pony Step, even though we have a website, that people were reverting back to wanting a good old-fashioned, perfect bound, glossy magazine, you know.
Also, there's a lot of authority that comes with working for an international title. A blog is one person's opinion.
Sure.
An international title like GRAZIA, you know, it has almost 20 editions around the world.
Sure.
It's been going since the 1930s. There's a lot of authority that comes with that. And readers trust what you deliver. Yeah. So
that's true. Do you think, but just poses to both of you really, I mean, do you think there's too much content generally out there for people? I mean, does, you know, we're in a room full of people here that probably absorb it with abandon and pleasure. But to be honest, a lot of people do get put off at the amount of content that's out there, not just online, but in print as well. Everywhere you turn, there's something to read, something to digest. Do you think blogging has just fueled this even more? I mean, tell me about your thoughts about that, Tala. Do you think there is too much content out there generally? Or can't you get enough of it?
You know what, I don't mind it, because if I'm on the computer, I always have something to read, and if I'm traveling, I always have a bunch of magazines that I can buy. I pretty much don't mind it.
Do you not think, though, somewhere down the line, it makes you wonder who we can trust and who we can believe with all these separate opinions? The days where we only had sort of reduced media, you would align yourself to...
But maybe that's why magazines and bloggers work so well together, because obviously, you know, the bloggers will approach us, and if we find them credible, then, you know, we'd work together on something which would then be published in the magazine, and then that gives them credibility, and so on and so forth. And then, you know, obviously luxury brands look for local personalities and bloggers to endorse their products. And they will call us and say, you know, who do you recommend? Who's reputable? Who do you rate? So.
Okay. I mean, talking of endorsement and brands, Tala, your blog's gone from strength to strength. Can you sort of describe a typical day in your life and what that might involve?
A typical day is difficult, but maybe something more specific. Yeah, I don't have a typical day-to-day schedule, especially because now I kind of blog more lifestyle. So But
if you're at the stage now where you have to have an agent to handle your affairs, that sort of gives me the sense that you're doing a lot of things.
So now I take on, more branded. So I team up with a brand and we do a project, and it helps having someone there to kind of handle the business aspect of things, because at the end of the day, I'm very consistent with my site. It's updated every day, 7 days a week, and it really helps having someone that kind of talks about all this. I mean, the bits and bobs that need to kind of be handled. So now I'm signed on with someone here and in the UK. But I'm also very picky about what kind of brand endorsements and what kind of brand partnerships I take on. Because
I was looking at some other blogs apart from your own, and there's a lot of what they call super bloggers out there now. Danielle Bernstein in New York is an FIT student. I don't know whether you ever look at her blog, whowhatandwhen.com. She's basically a student in New York. She's 21. She's still studying, but she is receiving packages of clothes every day, lookbooks to choose things from. She has fleets of cars waiting for her at New York Fashion Week. She's designing, collaborating, and there's also this lady, the Man Repeller. I don't know whether you ever look at that. Like she's a little bit different. She's taken the kind of slight anti-style route, but she's still working with companies like this company that send out.
She's just been published, actually. She's just published her first book.
Right. Yeah. So that's a sign.
Yeah.
But you know, this
now in print.
Illustration here, this beauty box. Bloggers being asked to choose their best products, and basically, getting to that stage is quite amazing. I think. They are. I noticed in your blog that you went to Paris Fashion Week recently, but you didn't go on the metro from show to show, did you? You're being ferried around by beautiful Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
I mean, from how I started the conversation about me thinking blogs were slightly second class. Now you've really kind of there aren't many fashion editors that are being taken around in Rolls. Have you been in a Rolls-Royce recently, Elaine?
Honestly, no. I don't even know if I've ever been in one.
Right. Okay. But that was quite a nice perk.
It was.
Would you agree that the perks are better than ever? And I'm not saying you're in it for the perks, but they are there.
Yeah, but I decline more things than I accept. Wow. And with Rolls-Royce, to be fair, my parents are actually Rolls-Royce consumers, which is why that kind of there was a relationship there. And you know what? With the rise of Instagram and Twitter and blogs and everything, it's all very instant, very visual, and it's word of mouth, and it gets around really fast. And I think they kind of wanted to raise awareness and show that Rolls-Royce isn't your uber luxury kind of car, and that's driven by older men, and so they partnered up.
Would you say that you are the exception to the rule? I mean, would you say that there are a very small amount of bloggers who have got the luxury of being accepting these things and being involved with these things, or is it an everyday occurrence now? Would you say internationally there are a lot of bloggers that are receiving these perks and sort of branding alliances and such like?
I mean, I guess brands kind of team up with bloggers that they feel relate to their brand.
Just wondering whether it's the norm now.
You know what? I'm the worst person to ask, because now I tend to read more magazines and online magazines more than blogs.
Okay.
Well, I was saying earlier, actually, I met a blogger last week, and she was heading to the Vogue Dubai Fashion Experience at Dubai Mall, and she told me she had 4 different outfit changes for the night. So she was working with 4 brands, and she had said she would change, obviously, for each of their in-store events. And obviously her blog is about her sartorial choices, but then if she's being dictated to by these brands, then I guess it's lacking integrity.
Okay.
But, obviously then there are bloggers who can't be bought.
No, I mean, there was a sort of, it's an ongoing discussion, and it's kind of old news, but it's been updated recently, is that Susie Menkes of the International Herald Tribune, I know you all know who that is, has been quite critical in the press about gifting and about bloggers
absolutely.
sort of ending up, she's called it a kind of a circus if you go to Fashion Week now. I mean, I was in Paris last season, you come out of a show and you have, it's busier outside a show than it is inside. You've got bloggers, you've got photographers taking pictures of bloggers blogging each other, members of the public that don't know what's happening, they're all kind of confused. There's people wandering around in kind of lime green suits wanting to be It's a bit of a circus now, and I'm not saying it's all bloggers' fault, but she's kind of leveling it that it's more about shopping and about endorsement than it is about proper, insightful journalism. How do you feel about that, Tala?
You know what, I will say it can get to people. It's very easy that you get into this and you have brands telling you that they're going to offer you this and gift you this, and it's easy to get to people, but I also think those bloggers burn out fast. But I think now there's just a ton of bloggers. I personally can't keep up with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you are well known in the industry. You people know you. They come up to you and they treat you in a special way now. How does that make you feel? Does that give you a feeling that you have a responsibility, or that you have to take it much more seriously now?
I think because it happened organically. It didn't happen overnight. When I started my site, this was all very new.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't happen overnight. I think I just have to be careful with it's easy to get really into it and turn very commercial, and I think that's when your blog suffers, because at the end of the day, I'm hoping to do this for a while. It's not just I'm now doing this as a full-time job. But what I mean is it can get to people. If you get offered a ton of things, it's easy to say yes and accept to do that and blog for it in return.
Sure.
But I think if you want to be there for the long run, it's your duty to kind of know where you stand and know what you want to what you want to be talking about.
Okay. Just last little question to you, Elaine. I mean, do you think this glut of blogs, and not just blogs, online content, and even independent magazines like my own, do you think that we have democratized fashion, or do you think we've just diluted the effect? It's kind of a heavy question, but I mean...
It is a bit heavy. I think the effect has been diluted for sure, but maybe it's not down to online magazines and blogs, maybe it's just down to the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that fashion weeks and shows aren't as exclusive as they used to be, because you can watch live streams from anywhere in the world, and you can practically be there, or you can be there virtually. So I think that's probably responsible for diluting.
Okay.
that.
Just a couple of last. I've interviewed a few people recently on this subject, just to get their words, just quickly. Susie Bowell, when I asked about it, she said there's a reverberating recognition of bloggers as more than just renegades that will disappear, and this has resulted in many high-profile branding blogger alliances. She's all for it, basically. Whereas Lloyd-Jones at GQ said that the glut of magazines and online content and blogs have diluted the state of journalism. People want quality. There's some really good websites and some really good blogs, but most of the stuff is rubbish out there. Just by dint of numbers, things have to change. And he's basically saying at GQ we work harder now than ever, and that's down to fear. So even a magazine as big as GQ is keeping them on their toes,
Yeah.
So anyway, listen, we've got to sort of round up now. So I'm wondering whether people in the audience, there's time for some questions.
My question actually is to all three of you. Now there are two new disruptions coming. One is short films. The shorthand films, which sites like Amazon and specific sites like DXB, now .dxb, which will be coming in, are going to bring. And the editorial voices that are moving digitally. You're right, there's absolutely a lot of content, but now the editorial voices are moving digital. How then are both bloggers and the media, the print media, going to synergize with them?
Well, I think it's obviously easier for bloggers to do that because they can embed those films onto their...
No, those will be copyrighted because each film puts you back by about $25,000. These are highly visual content and very, very high quality content. Because I'm saying they're all editorially perfect. So they're editorial voices that are going in now. And so these are not going to be that simple or that easy. And they're going to be completely focused. How then is there going to be a synergy? And yes, I think you're right. I think it's going to be people who are natives, like bloggers, who will get on easier. But how is the synergy going to be seen?
I don't really think sort of short films pose a threat at all, to be honest. And I think, if anything, online magazines are evolving in that direction anyway.
Sure.
I think if you download the Vogue app on an iPad, you can kind of click into the cover story or the fashion shoots, and they'll actually show you kind of a short video of the production and process.
There
So
are
I
things
think,
like Nick Knight's Style Studio as well, things
yeah.
like that.
So,
Tala, any thoughts on that?
I agree with Elaine.
Just a quick question to all of you all. Where do you see both traditional media, which is we're looking at as magazines, whether that's online or print, and blogs going in the next 5 years, both in the Middle East as well as worldwide?
Dubai is a very young city, so I think we've got a long way to go, and I think obviously the next step for us is having more online presence, and that's something that we're looking at doing next year.
Personally, I would like to think that there's room for both and that both things will grow together, and there should be no dissent between the two medias, really. I mean, we're all in it together. I think it's made it more democratic, and I think if we can work together, there is room for both. I think the blogging thing, to be honest, I think it's kind of plateaued, and I'm not sure whether it will get any bigger at the moment. Technology might bring that about, I'm not sure. The magazine market is a little bit fickle. I can only speak in the UK. Some people are doing it's feast or famine. Some people are doing really well. Dailies are doing really badly. Women's weeklies are doing really badly in the UK. It's the biannuals that are doing the best. You can go to somewhere like Selfridges or into Soho and see 20 or 30 really fantastic style magazines. They're all read by the same 15,000 people, but you'll see great pieces in there, contrary art pieces, great fashion shoots. And because I work in both online and print, I'm kind of trying to champion both, really. Tala, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's room for both, and they're both going to evolve. We're definitely having an online moment here in the Middle East. Things are changing.
But maybe ultimately, the ultimate recognition for a blogger would be, to be in print at the end of the day, like, Scott Shulman from the Sartorialist. Obviously, he worked with GQ, that was one of his big breaks. Then he held an exhibition and sold prints of his work, and then went on to publish books. Same with the Man Repeller, who you mentioned. She's just published her first book. And Tommy Ton as well, the street style photographer, obviously contributes to Harper's Bazaar, and he shoots fashion for them. So maybe ultimately, recognition is actually in print as well for bloggers. And
hopefully they'll all be on bookshelves in 20 years, and you might have to dust them down, but at least you won't have to turn on a computer to look at them. Any other question?
I'm just curious to know what you guys think about the next direction of digital, digital content. Is it getting lazier? Do people need to blog anymore? Can you just, or what's after Instagram? So it's just, for me, I would want to know, I'm curious to know what you guys think about the direction of digital media for fashion.
I have no idea what's coming after Instagram, but I look forward to finding out.
I'm a bit split with social media. I like some of it, but some of it I just don't get. And one thing I don't get is Instagram. Maybe it's my age or I'm just too busy writing. I'm so bored of seeing plates of food that have been enhanced with a filter. But then I love certain aspects of social media. I think you have to sort of cherry pick what you like and not think that you have to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. See, I think Instagram is great because if you follow, you can follow people like, Dolce & Gabbana, and you can see what they do on their day off.
Right.
See them hanging out with their Labradors, and
Yeah, I can
It's
see
good
the
to have an
appeal,
insight.
but I think it's become too easy. Like anybody's 15-year-old child can pretend to be Cecil Beaton now with a black and white filter, and it's a bit it's sort of denigrated photography, but that's a whole other subject, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we have to finish there. So listen, I just want to say thank you very much to my guests, Tala and Elaine, and thank you very much for turning up today.